Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life. My name is NBZ and this is episode 78. We're reeling still from all of the announcements of the Nintendo Switch, but we're here. We have made sure to take ourselves off the internet for 5 seconds to actually talk about video games and things. Bally joins me as always. Bally, how are you?
Happy Halloween.
It is indeed, yeah. Happy Halloween to everyone out there.
I don't know. It's not that big in Europe. It's a sort of
no.
It's sort of like considered a good night out in the UK, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah, basically.
Really go beyond that.
No, there's not the kind of, I think, care and attention to detail about scrutinizing over costumes and stuff. Like, I've seen some people, American games media people on Twitter sharing their costumes. I'm like, dear God, you put in so much work for this. Like, I saw Brian Altano's Willy Wonka costume, which looked just fucking fantastic. And I'm like, man, I would not have the time or desire to put any effort into something that good.
No, we're in hot anticipation of Guy Fawkes Night.
Exactly.
That's where it's at. That's
way more important.
Real,
we just look at some exploding things in the sky and some fire because we like to burn things.
In order to celebrate preventing gunpowder being blown up, we explode gunpowder.
Exactly.
It's like the logic, you know.
Yeah, we're a smart group of people over here, so that's what we do. Bally, it's time to tell people. However, it's no longer can we sit here and just prattle along, because people are here to listen to stuff about video games. Apparently, what are we going to be talking about in this show?
So we have what we've been playing for the first segment, and then for the second segment, we have a very special guest for an extended segment, and that is Liam Robertson, who is we're gonna have a chat with, have a little chat with him about the Switch and what he thinks for the future of the newly announced system.
Absolutely, and that is going to be a longer one, so no emails, but emails will be part of that segment. So I guess with no emails, Bally, let's just quickly remind people, hey, if you want to send emails, you can send them to an email address. What is that, Bally?
Send them to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com, and we love receiving them all. It's great. Great to read.
Yes, indeed. So, Bally, let's kick things off. You've been playing some video games. I've been playing some video games. Let's tell people about them. How about you start?
I've been playing Star Fox Guard.
The game which no one really cared about, apparently. Like, no one cared about Star Fox Zero to begin with. But Star Fox Guard was one of those games which I don't think many people even bothered reviewing it, despite the fact that it came as a separate... Does it come as a separate disc? I guess you downloaded it so you wouldn't know. It was definitely an individual product of its own accord.
So yeah, I got Star Fox Guard with Star Fox Zero, and it was like a discount that Nintendo did on the eShop, and it was the same time almost as my Nintendo launched, and I thought I'd get some benefits. So I got loads of points and...
Oh, right, you had to buy it separately. It didn't come with it when you bought it digitally.
No, it was like you got an extra discount for owning Star Fox Zero digitally. But
right.
But yeah, you're right. It was hard for a game that was with Star Fox Zero getting such mixed reviews and such lukewarm reception. The little brother of the game with a lukewarm reception is never going to get much of a reception either. So
no, exactly.
I definitely think this was one that sort of the hardest of the core Nintendo fans and Star Fox fans went for. And it's kind of a shame that it didn't get more traction, because this game does a lot of really cool stuff. Essentially, it's tower defense with a twist. I must admit, it was a lot deeper than I realized. But ultimately, you're protecting a central tower in the center of a maze, and you're protecting them from waves of robots that are coming onto the map, and you're using cameras that are planted around the maze, and you swap to the cameras using the touchscreen, and you shoot the robots. And what's so great about it is that it's one of those games that's very unique to the Wii U. You can't really do this on any other system. So when you're on the TV screen, you're looking at all your cameras and what they're looking at. And in the center of the TV screen is the camera that you're using at the time. So when you swap to that camera, it becomes the central screen. On the gamepad, it's an aerial view of the entire maze. So when robots come onto the map, you can see from an aerial view where they are on the map using the gamepad. But the advantage of the TV screen is that you can see them before they even come onto the maze. So it's sort of like preempting the robots coming on is more important when you're using the TV. I initially thought that the guns in this game were fixed. So you planted your cameras, which have guns attached to them, I should say. But there's so much like ability to customize where you put each camera before the matches start. So the whole game, there's 50 levels in the main game and then another 50 extra. So it's quite a meaty game. And there's 5 worlds, and in each world there's 3 areas per world, and within each area there's 3 stages.
It's like a fucking onion, isn't it? Just
like an onion. But within each area, so 3 stages within each area, your cameras stay set up between stages. So the first time you do a stage in a certain area, you can set up all your cameras the way you want to do the stage, and then for the next stage all your cameras will still be set up, so you can sort of tweak them to see like what worked, what didn't work. And it's really great because I always moved the cameras from what the default told me. I always put them I really liked putting cameras that could see straight down corridors, whereas the game naturally tended to put cameras on sort of the sides of walls and things, and I didn't like them like that. I liked them straight down corridors, because then when you switch to those cameras, it's much quicker to just start shooting the enemy you can see.
Right, because they're like directly in front of you.
Exactly. So another thing I didn't realize was that you can actually aim with the guns. Like I thought, like I said, they were fixed, and fixed in 2 senses. Fixed in the sense you can move the cameras about the map, which you can before the match, and you can actually do it during, but I never did that. And secondly, fixed in the sense that you can aim the gun while you're on a camera, if that makes sense. So it's, and like I said, massive Star Fox story put through it and everything, and that goes all the way through to the guns and the sound design, and it all feels like one very unified universe, which I can get to in a bit and talk about spin-offs. But it's just a really solid format, because you've got 2 types of robots. You've got your chaos robots and your combat robots. So combat robots are what cause you to lose the stage. So if a combat robot reaches the middle, you lose. The chaos robots, it doesn't matter necessarily if they get to the middle, but they basically aid to the combat robots. So the chaos robots do crazy stuff to your cameras. So for example, there are these 1 chaos robots that are like just these wind propellers, and they get close to your cameras, and then all of a sudden it makes all the cameras nearby point straight up in the sky and makes them hopeless. And it's really frustrating, because then you go back to your camera and you have to spend time using the analog. You can control them using the analog sticks. There's no motion control, so it's analog sticks to move them back down. And that's just one example of a chaos robot. Another example is this one that's a magnet, and basically it draws the attention of all the cameras. So you might have all your cameras facing the right way on each corridor, etc. But this magnet enemy just drags the cameras to face it, and then all your cameras out of place. That's another instance of making it really difficult. And then they help the combat robots, where the combat robots some move very, very fast and don't take many hits at all. Others are very, very plodding and slow, but take a lot of hits, so you do have to spend a lot of time shooting them. There are some combat class robots that don't appear on cameras. They're invisible, but do appear on the gamepad, and vice versa. So there are some robots that only appear on the cameras but not on the gamepad. So
it seems like they're kind of building difficulty by varying up the enemies that you're going against then, because what I was wondering is, I think in a lot of not necessarily tower defense style games, but horde mode stuff, like where you're having waves of enemies coming at you and you're kind of trying to take them all down and stay alive, they have the ability to like put down traps and lay down other kind of objects to help you in kind of slowing the flow of the enemies that are coming at you. So I was wondering, does this game give you more things to toy with, or is it just sticking with the base mechanics of moving these cameras and having the guns up and ready?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is a ranked system throughout. So there's 50 ranks in the game, and each rank unlocks something new, whether that's a level or a power-up. So the power-ups are range from stuff like a freezing cam, or a slow down time cam, or like an extra power cam. And these are basically add-ons you can put onto a camera to do what it says on the tin. So I think the most powerful one was definitely the slow down time camera. So while you're using this camera, time moves slower. So it gives you extra time to just point and shoot. So
does that apply to the entire maze, or is it just that individual feed?
I couldn't really tell, to be honest. I mean, I
guess like when you're focused on one thing at once, it's probably hard to like get a scope of the entire.
Yeah, I mean, if it only worked on what was in the scope of that camera, it would really muck up the time mechanics of the entire map. So I presume it slows down the entire map, but only works while you're on that camera. But yeah, there's like powerful cameras and things like that. So you can put these more powerful cameras in hot spots that you think more enemies will appear, which is quite nice. So there is a bit, and there is an added layer of the ability to like customize the map.
So you're saying cool. There's lots of kind of variation that you bring into it, because I think one thing with tower defense games is if you just stick with the same stuff and you're kind of going level to level, there may be a tendency to get bored with it and kind of get tired with the formula. It sounds like they kind of shake things up enough to where you're kind of engaged throughout.
This game shakes things up on a really nice number of levels. The game, it was almost perfect difficulty scale. It never felt too hard, and it never felt like I was just breezing through it. It really genuinely felt like a genuine challenge each step of the way, and even the most hard levels, like maybe the final boss, and I can talk about bosses in a second, but the final boss, certain hard stages throughout, I only ever got stuck with them for maybe 2-3 times, and every time, maybe like the fourth time, I'd always do it. So it always felt like I was making progress, getting on, and it was just a really nice balance. So yeah, bosses. I didn't even realize this game actually has bosses. And when I mean bosses, I mean big dudes that come onto the stage, and it completely shakes up the formula, because for 2 of the worlds, the bosses are just more waves of robots, and that's fine. I completely understand, but I thought all the boss levels would be like that in this game. But actually, there's 3 separate bosses. So the first, third, and fifth world have these designed bosses that link to the Star Fox universe and are like extra big versions of some of the robots, and you fight them in a completely different way, and their attacks sort of wipe out numerous cameras at once, so you're really having to play the game in a different way, and I just thought that especially the final boss, which has I think 3 or 4 separate stages, it just worked really well to mix up the formula, try something new, and I just think overall this game does so many great things. I think that it's very clear that this is a mechanic that has been shoehorned into the Star Fox universe, and
I mean, we know that from the fact that this whole idea was presented to us at E3 as Project Guard back in the day. So clearly Nintendo do this all the time anyway. Like, they have ideas for gameplay mechanics first and foremost, and then they're like, what franchise can we kind of stick onto this and kind of label? So.
And as much as it's shoehorned in, I do love it when Nintendo do these spin-offs, and obviously something like Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, where it just sort of takes the same universe and looks at an original story from a different angle, and obviously Captain Toad does link to the story of 3D World, and that's a cool little
as
twist.
Far as a story even goes. But
it's very, very minute, but it's a nice touch, I think. And this game
Totally.
is the same. It links in some way, and you do see Star Fox and Falco and the rest of the gang and whatever, and all the planets are the same as Star Fox, apart from one new bonus planet, which I won't spoil. It's very funny though, and people should check that out. The final planet is hilarious. But I just really like that they try to keep it as one unified universe, and it's nice. I thought it was really good for that. But this game just screams out the sort of game I will really, really miss when the Wii U era is done. I'd put this alongside Star Fox Zero, obviously, and something like Nintendo Land. I think these are 3 games, and they're too few and far between. I think it's crazy that I can only name 3 off the top of my head, 2 of which are Star Fox. I'm trying to think of some other unique
Affordable Space Adventures.
Affordable Space Adventures. I'll even go for Mario Maker, although that's potentially doable. We'll see what Switch has to offer, but
yeah, I mean, it's essentially the games that use the 2 screens at once for kind of asymmetrical purposes.
Fantastic asymmetrical gameplay, and between like this Nintendo Land Zero, like I said, it will really be missed. I know none of those games really sold very well. You could definitely tell that Nintendo hoped they'd have a similar impact as something like Wii Sports. That was as far from the truth as possible.
Yep.
But they're just such great experiences that I'm glad to have experienced on Wii U, and they will be sorely missed. And I fully back the Switch. I think it's exciting, but you gotta give it to the Wii U. Like, it's got a level of innovation that is so fresh and something different. And it didn't work. I completely accept it didn't pay off, but I enjoyed it all the same. And this game is just another example of that. So yeah, Star Fox Guard. If you own a Wii U, I'd highly recommend trying it out. I think it's fairly cheap, and you're not going to get experience like it anywhere else. It was a really cool game. Loved it. It was good. Yeah.
Great.
Zed.
Yeah. So I have finished some games finally. As you know, we've been talking about the last couple of episodes. I've just been like playing 7 things at once, so I'm just kind of
7 long ass games.
Yeah, it's bad. But I decided, like, I was close to the end of Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice, so I decided focus on that, get that finished off, and I really enjoyed it. I like most Phoenix Wright games. I think probably the weakest one in the series is the second game in the original trilogy. And obviously I talked about Apollo Justice a few shows ago and how much I actually really enjoyed that. And the thing that worked out in this case was Spirit of Justice is basically a direct sequel to Apollo Justice, and Dual Destinies, which was the 5th game, is kind of an anomaly where that game focused much more on the new character, who is Athena Sykes, and her backstory and the stuff that kind of linked into her becoming an attorney and all that stuff. So there wasn't much kind of linkage between number 4 and number 5, whereas 4 and 6 seem kind of directly aligned to one another. And that was perfect because I just played 4, so I knew all these characters. I had exactly a great idea of what was going on in it, and it was paying off well. So, like, there are a couple of cases, like the second case is a lot to do with magic and to deal with Trucy because she has this magic troupe, and there's links back to the whole magic circle, which was a big plot point in the 4th game. So I thought, like, straight away, I'm, like, totally into it. But it's basically split between 2 locations. So you have Phoenix, who is based in this new place, the Kingdom of Khura'in, which is essentially I don't know, an analog for whatever Asian culture or country you can think of, where they have, you know, spirit mediums and they all like do weird things and like have, I don't know, different rules and things are different. But the whole setup of that whole kingdom is that lawyers are basically shunned and they are banned, and people hate lawyers because of some history in the past that has gone on, and so they have this idea of the Defense Culpability Act, which is if someone is defending someone in a court of law and they lose the case, so if the lawyer ends up not proving them not guilty, then the lawyer is basically executed along with the person who is accused. Yeah, so it kind of adds this weird level of tension to it, although to be honest, like, there's never too much tension because you know that this is basically a visual novel and scripted, so everything's going to go along a certain path. They try their best, obviously, to kind of throw spanners in the works, which always is the case with Phoenix Wright games. But yeah, it's an interesting setup because it's very different from kind of places they've gone before. There's kind of an analog in the main games, which is the place called Khura'in Village, which is pretty much linked to this place. But yeah, it's interesting that they're kind of jumping back and forth between characters, and it's something they've started doing, especially in the 5th game. But it's a good way to kind of give you different perspectives and see things from different angles. But I think the most core difference within this game is obviously the new mechanic that's introduced. So every game they kind of throw something different in there, and over the course they kind of build upon them, and eventually you have this game which has like 7 different unique mechanics in it, whether it be Apollo's bracelet, which I talked about when I talked about the 4th game, where he can kind of sense ticks in people as he's watching them, or whether it be the psych locks, which I think are from the 2nd game, where Phoenix has to basically go through and deduct things that people are hiding and break these locks open. So this one is called the Divination Seance, and so essentially the idea is you get to see the last maybe 30 seconds of a person's life before they die, and that allows you to kind of intuit things that have gone on and trickery that might have taken place.
How did they do that?
Well, it's explained through spirituality and spirit mediums. This is a game where like you can channel spirits and they reappear after they're dead. There are cases where spirits come on to the court and you have to cross-examine a person who's already died, but they're back in the courtroom because they've been channeled. Yes, of course, this game is weird and wacky. But anyway, the idea of the Divination Seance is basically you're watching this scene play out, and you see different things, and it basically shows you like this is something that is based on sight or on sound or on smell or whatever, and it kind of throws up words on the screen to indicate like, oh, pain, this is when the person died because the thing got stabbed into them, or the smell of garlic was wafting through the air or whatever, right? So you basically go through and examine the video, and at the same time the person who has summoned the seance, who's this character called Rafa, she basically gives an account of what she understands to have happened from viewing that scene. And so the idea is basically you're trying to find inconsistencies between what she has said and what is actually shown. And so it basically acts as a kind of minimalized form of the cross-examination, but it's very much more visual, which I think is appreciative, because a lot of the time when we're talking about, or when the games in this series talk about the deaths that have happened, it's very much out of context. You have like screenshots and images and like overhead views, like the rooms and locations that this stuff took place in, but you never get a like direct visual image of things that happened at the time, like how the murder actually took place. So I think that's just a cool element to add to it, and I appreciated it. But yeah, I think like aside from that, it's very much standard fare. It's a solid game. The writing, as always, is fantastic. There's references abound, and great localization. So I love the series. I think that it should keep continuing, and they should keep localizing all of them. Don't mind if they bring them out digitally. If they're not, if they're too concerned about not selling enough physical copies, then the digital storm I'm fine with. Especially when like I think this was priced as £25, so they don't like go overboard like charging you out the nose for it. So. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure where it ranks. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm not sure the final case is one of the stronger ones. There's definitely some great twists and turns. But I think, yeah, you should probably play this if you're a fan of the series. If you're not a fan of the series, start at the beginning, because you will not have a fucking clue what is going on otherwise.
That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no, Bally, I say don't ever play this game until you're actually at a point where you'll understand what's going on.
Yes.
Because that would be a misstep for sure. So yeah, finally finished that off, and then it's Halloween, Bally, as you mentioned at the top of the show. Nintendo decided to have a Halloween themed sale on the eShop, and that included pretty much every Castlevania game on Virtual Console. And as you know, I've been kind of going through my play every Metroidvania, Castlevania in order, chronological order of release. So I picked up Aria of Sorrow on GBA, which I will get to at some point. But I also decided I was going to pick up the original Castlevania, the NES game, the first, the foremost.
How many were on NES?
3 were on
Three,
NES. So the first 3 were on NES, and then there was Super Castlevania 4. There's Rondo of Blood, which I think is a TurboGrafx game, and then Symphony of the Night, I think. So maybe 6 games before you get into the Metroidvania era. So there's a lot of history before it becomes like what people know it as today, or I guess, to be honest, people don't really know it as anything today because Konami doesn't give a fuck.
And that's because this original, it's level based and it's not a Metroidvania area.
It's not structured in the same way. It is it's traditional kind of a lot of NES games were like this, where you kind of side-scrolling levels and you fight a boss at the end, right? So this game I have watched multiple people play, and I know it relatively well. I understand the mechanics of Castlevania, and I think that they're very cool. This is also one of the hardest games I've ever played in my life. It is unforgivingly brutal. I was talking about Mario 3 a while ago, and how I thought it had fuck you level design, and how I thought that was horrible and it was bad. And Castlevania also has fuck you level design. But the difference for me is, and I was trying to explain this
walking on eggshells here.
I know, but like, I'm trying to like rationalize in my head, because I find it very difficult to be like, on the one hand I really like playing Castlevania, on the other hand Mario 3 frustrates me, right? Because essentially they're doing the same things, where they're forcing you to learn levels and replay them. And what it essentially comes down to is Mario 3 is just a much bigger and longer game in scope. And so the idea of making progression and moving through it is, it's much harder to kind of get a sense of like, hey, I'm doing something and I'm achieving something, because the levels there are so many of them and it goes on forever. Castlevania is a very short game. And so each level unto itself is kind of contained into a series of rooms that have a very specific setup that can be learned and that can be executed on.
You're learning less, I guess. You're learning fewer levels.
Right, and it's also, I mean, it's also down to control, because I don't like the slipperiness of Mario 3 as much. Castlevania has maybe the opposite problem, where it is extremely sluggish and tankish.
Plodding.
Like, your character moves very slowly. The whole idea of air control with jumps just doesn't exist. Like, once you've committed to a jump forward, you can't, like, adjust yourself in midair. Like, you are moving, either you're jumping straight upwards, or you're jumping forwards and there's no movement or adjustment. So it is very much about anticipation and knowing where things are going to be before you attempt them, right? And the thing is, when you get to a level and you start to go through it, you're going to get murdered. Like, you're going to straight up die. You're going to have no idea how the hell anyone got through it. But over time, as you kind of analyze it and think through, like, okay, there are these certain weapons that I can get, and I can potentially do this to this enemy, and I need to make sure that happens at this specific time. You build up this memory bank and this kind of toolkit that you can employ, and soon enough you're getting through the whole level taking no hits and getting to the boss. And that's where it kind of breaks down for me, because some of the bosses are infuriatingly difficult, to the point where, like, not only getting through this level is difficult, just straight up beating this boss, if there was to just be a spawn point right by it, I would have a hard time anyway. So obviously, like, that's a massive problem. I was very much trying to play this game like people would back in the day, where I wasn't using save states, because I thought, like, as a shorter game, I can probably move my way through it and learn it and make sure that I'm understanding everything. But it just got to a point where it was just, I can't. Like, the last 2 levels are just some of the hardest things I've ever done in games. And it broke me down, it killed me. Maybe one day I'll go back and be able to actually push through and finish it properly. But my God, like, the Grim Reaper fight in particular is one where you have this long corridor of Medusa heads at the same time as these Axe Knights, so you're having to, like, make sure you're not getting hit by those and their weird movement patterns, whilst also making sure not to get hit by the axes thrown either up or down, and moving them back at the same time while not being hit, while retaining all your sub-weapons and your heart so that you can use them. Look, it's a level of just minutia that kind of gets ridiculous. But I really like Castlevania. I just think the mechanics are fun. I think that having that idea of the sub-weapon where you can collect and figure out whether you like throwing the axes or using the holy water, and kind of that customization that comes along with it. The whip, I just think, is a cool weapon. It just doesn't get used in video games at all. Like I struggle to think of any like 3D games that have taken the whip as a main weapon and used it competently. I think Pandora's Tower may be one that did it, but like aside from that, it's very hard to imagine like any other series that does this kind of this thing. So yeah, I don't know. It just has a great aesthetic to it, and of course, like the big thing about these games is the music. The soundtrack for the original Castlevania is fucking fantastic. So as I was, spending 2.5 hours on this one level going through, I was listening to podcasts and stuff while I was doing it, but, I wouldn't have minded just sitting there and listening to the soundtrack, because it is just so, so good. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people miss from these games is that fantastic Konami soundtrack. So, yeah, it was a tough one, Bally. But
you did it.
I'm glad I played through it, because really gives me context now for just how fucking difficult that game is.
Are you going to play 2 and 3 anytime soon?
I don't know. I don't think I ever want to play 3 because I watched Vinny Caravella play through 3, and the nightmare seems like unfathomable. Like, it's this game but turned up like 3 or 4 notches, and I don't think I have the stomach for that, quite honestly. 2 is weird. 2 is basically, it's kind of where that kind of seed of the Metroid elements started seeping in, but as with every single second game in a video game series in the NES era, it was just an offshoot that was weird and completely different from the original. So yeah, it's just strange how that happened, isn't it? Like, Mario 2 is obviously a completely different game, Doki Doki Panic. Zelda 2 is a side-scrolling RPG. Like, Metroid 2 was on the Game Boy and was weird. So generally, like, it follows that pattern, and I don't know, it's one of those games that I think I could go through, but maybe have a guide, because there's dumb shit like you have to go to this very specific spot that looks like nothing in particularly special about it, and crouch there for like 10 seconds, and a thing will come along and whisk you away to a different place. So that's the kind of level of fucked up obscurity in Castlevania 2. So I would imagine that having a guide at hand for that would be a necessity, I'll say. But yeah, I mean, now I can focus on going back to my good old GBA Castlevanias and leveling up and just exploring castles. So I'm glad to do that.
And they're on the Wii Virtual Console. You've just got with the sale. Cool.
Yes. So there we go. So that is basically gonna close things out for our video games that we've been playing. Join us though after the break, where we'll return with a longer segment breaking down some more stuff about Nintendo Switch and all our thoughts inside. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Alright everyone, welcome back to the show for the second half, and we're joined in this special segment, kind of talking more about the Nintendo Switch, by video game detective himself, Liam Robertson. Welcome back to the show, Liam.
Hi. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on the show again. For people who don't know who you are, what you do, quick elevator pitch about what you do.
Well, I guess I'm a sort of video game historian, researcher guy, and I dig up games that were cancelled mainly, and also I do a little bit of current research on the side, but not very much nowadays. But I always have, I guess, my eyes in the kind of the insider scene, and I talk to those people. So I have some feelers out there, but
Absolutely.
I'm mostly doing history stuff nowadays, researching games that weren't released and that kind of thing.
Very good. And you've also recently, I think, since last time you came on the podcast, you started doing some stuff for Did You Know Gaming, which is very cool.
Oh yeah. Towards I think it was towards the end of last year, they hit me up, and yeah, I started basically just doing what I was doing before, the Unseen 64 videos, and then just decided to host those, and we came to a nice agreement on those, and it was a good way to kind of bring the site and the series to more people, which is cool, and I'm enjoying doing it. There are a lot of people try to put me off doing that, actually, doing Did You Know Gaming, but they're all very
really?
nice people, I can confirm, and yeah, they're cool.
Good stuff.
Great.
Well, let's jump in then and let's talk about Nintendo Switch, which we didn't get like that much more information from Nintendo themselves in the past week. They said that they weren't really talking about it that much at the investor briefing. There have been some interviews here and there with Kimishima. But before we jump into all that new stuff, Liam, I just want to hear from you. What are your feelings on the Switch? What do you think about it? What were your kind of first impressions?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't. It was hard to be surprised by a lot of the stuff that they showed because,
Right.
I mean, it was all already out there, and I kind of just accepted that was the way it was going to be several months ago. I knew Eurogamer stuff was solid, and it turned out pretty much all to be true. But I was impressed by quite a few things. I like, this is a bit of a boring thing, but I like the marketing kind of angle they've taken to it. Everyone comments, "Oh, there's no kids in it." That's true, and I kind of like that they're going for the man-child audience. That's cool.
As man-children ourselves, I think we appreciate it.
Yeah, and one thing I was also impressed about was just the build quality and just how nice the thing looks. It looks a lot better than I was expecting. I like my Wii U, but I don't really like the gamepad that much, and the same with the 3DS. When you compare it to something like an iPhone or even a Vita, like the build quality isn't that great. But
they're very chunky like pieces of hardware Nintendo usually make, and I think that's probably to do with kids like dropping them and making sure they're very much bulletproof. You know, like that original Game Boy is such a big, well-known like chunky thing that survived a war, I think it was, and they've got that thing in the Nintendo store, the one that's almost like half blown up. But I definitely agree. I appreciate the more sleek design. That's the thing that really stood out to me. Was like, man, this actually kind of looks like a modern tablet. It's crazy.
That's true. I think that's one of the things that held the gamepad back. I think that there's a wider problem with the gamepad in that they didn't really figure out how to use it properly in an interesting way, largely. But yeah, the tablet, I don't know what are they. Is there an actual name for the controller?
I don't know if the tablet has a name. Like they've named the Joy-Cons, the separate controllers. They've named the Joy-Con grip.
Exactly.
I guess it's just the Switch because
right. Yeah, that's true. It's because that is the actual
sense.
console itself. So the tablet would just be the Switch.
Yeah. Well, it looks very nice. It looks very thin, which is another thing that surprised me, and it looks like it could stand up there with an Apple product for the most part, which is good.
Totally.
That's the kind of the audience they want to go for, and I appreciate that.
Great. I definitely can echo a lot of your feelings there. It just struck me like straight out of the gate, like this kind of feels like a new Nintendo in a way that they're going after this kind of different design aesthetic.
For
sure.
Definitely, it feels like our baby's growing up a bit.
Yeah, finally. It's taken them a little while.
It's like they're aiming at that generation who have played Nintendo games in their childhood, and then they're saying, let's take you to the next step as you grow into a man-child, like you were saying earlier. And it's quite positive.
I think that's hopefully going to see them a fair bit of success. It's what they did with Pokemon Go, you know. They've tapped into that audience as it's grown up now, and everyone has phones, and a lot of people prefer using just phones to, dedicated handhelds, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's maybe jump into a bunch of different rumor things that have been floating around since like the Switch stuff was revealed. Laura Kate Dale over at Let's Play Video Games has been sleuthing, doing some detective work, and she has very good sources. She did an excellent article on breaking down what all her sources were, where they came from, which I think is like required reading for anyone who's interested in that sort of stuff. But she has been reporting multiple different things. So let's start with this one, which is about the Wright Joy-Con supposedly offering IR pointer functionality. Now, the whole idea behind this would be that it could potentially replicate any touchscreen interface things being used without having to have the Switch in your hand. Do we think that like this idea of having motion control in these Joy-Cons is something that will happen, and that they're kind of focusing the message elsewhere because they don't want to confuse people? Because I feel like if they had shown off motion control stuff, people would have drawn comparisons to the Wii in a way that maybe would have gotten things muddy. Bally, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that if you looked at, say, the marketing behind the Nintendo 3DS, there wasn't much emphasis on the touchscreen, but obviously it still had a touchscreen and still had a lot of uses that were similar to a DS. I think you're right, it would have completely confused the message to include any sort of IR technology in the advert. But do I think it will have IR technology? Potentially, because I think a massive question that a number of other podcasts I've listened to have been asking is, how is this thing going to operate with Mario Maker? And like, surely Mario Maker was such a big success on the Wii U. How on earth are they going to bring that franchise to the system? And it just makes sense that IR technology, when the Switch is in the docking station, would make sense to actually utilize what would have been touchscreen controls on the Wii U.
Yeah, it's weird because it doesn't feel like it would work particularly well. Like,
not very
I think
well.
Motion controls are fine, but like in terms of replicating that touch and feel of the screen, it seems a bit hard. How do you feel about it, Liam? Do you think that they need to find a solution if there's touchscreen capabilities in the tablet itself?
I think it's just going to be a thing where I think we're just going to have to accept that there are things you will be able to do exclusively on the touchscreen that you won't on the screen. I think I think the IR pointer will be a thing, but I mean, if it's got a touchscreen, why not just take advantage of it? You know, that's the best way to do that. I'm sure there'll totally be ways to access it on the TV, but I think Nintendo and a lot of developers will just prefer to pick the thing up, do it on the touchpad. That's a much more intuitive way to do that, especially with Mario Maker, as you say. I just think I don't know anything about the IR pointer thing myself, or the motion controls. I'm really not sure about the motion controls in particular. That might be something that jacks up the price, and I'm not really sure how they would do that effectively.
And you just kind of wonder how much technology can they fit into those Joy-Cons themselves, because they have to be charged separately and they'll have to be carried around everywhere. I'm confused as to how important that stuff's going to be to them, especially when we're talking about price and like making sure it's mass market product. Like any extra technology you throw in there is just going to make things more expensive.
I think that was one of the problems with the Wii U. In retrospect, there's thing. The gamepad is like a Swiss Army knife of different things. Like it's got a camera. I think it's got a microphone. But half of those things, like, how many games even use those? Like, I can't remember how many games use the camera on the Wii U gamepad.
All I can think of is Nintendo Land, and it was just sort of like a funny thing when the system came out. You'd be playing, the octopus minigame. You'd be like, your face is on the TV, and it was like a one-time laugh. And beyond that, I genuinely can't think of another time it was used.
It was a good laugh, though. I did enjoy that face stuff on Nintendo Land, silly as it was.
But I see your point, Liam. Like, beyond that one use and beyond that one laugh, what use did it serve? Like, it is a bit weird.
another thing that I remember it using was another game was Zombie U. I don't know if you remember. It was it was such a small thing, but it was enough for Nintendo to use that in an E3 press conference.
Oh right, Reggie's whole face changing bit.
It was essentially Snapchat filters before Snapchat filters, and you could turn yourself into a zombie, and that was it. But it was enough for Reggie to demonstrate that on the stage, apparently. So yeah. Anyway, back to what you were saying.
I think the only other thing I was going to bring up was Wii U video chat, which Bali and I used a couple times because it was a silly thing that kind of like, you can draw on the screen on each other's faces. It was really dumb, but obviously like that's a way of using the microphone and the camera, although like how many people ever used it? Not many, I would say. I
forgot that existed, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. Is that still a thing on the Wii U now?
It is, yeah.
I've never opened that once, I don't think.
The app has just remained closed the entire time. So the bad thing about that as well is the only way you'd know if someone was calling you was if like the light around the home button was like blinking. But the light around the home button blinks like when anything happens, like when a friend comes online. Like it's the same coloured light and the same blink every time, so you have no idea when someone is contacting you. Which was, that's another failing of Wii U, is the whole friend integration. I think like adding friends was much easier, but like contacting them or messaging them or anything online was pretty much impossible. But we've got DNA working on the online infrastructure for the Switch, so hopefully that stuff will be more streamlined. There are a couple like small things that she's been reporting on. So the Switch Pro controllers are not going to have a headphone jack, apparently, which I find really unfortunate because I recently bought a PS4, and something that I found incredibly useful about it is having that headphone jack there, because I've got a huge-ass monitor that my PC is on, and my TV is a little bit small. So when I was playing through Uncharted 4, I basically played most of it on the monitor and was listening through the headphones. And I just think that like it's a convenience that I would have liked to have. But it's unfortunate it's not in there.
Yeah, I think we could see them release a premium like controller at some point above the Pro controller, because that's what they did with the Xbox One.
Oh, really? Okay.
The standard controller doesn't offer that, but you can get, it's kind of like a headphone adapter thing. That plugs into it. So it's possible they do something like that where you can plug a small adapter in and it enables headphones. But other than that, it is a shame, because I remember I played the Wonderful 101 using the gamepad like headphone thing, and that was great. Even though I was playing it on the TV. We should say the Switch itself has a headphone jack, but obviously when you're at home, that has to be in the dock. So there's really no way of doing that, unfortunately. So it is a shame. The next thing is much more practical, which is about memory storage, and we've all speculated it's going to be SD card. Apparently up to 128 gigabytes. That's not like 100% like the maximum, but that's what her sources have said. And the micro SD card supposedly slots in just under the kickstand, and you can kind of get a good image of it if you pause on the video when the kickstand is being kind of pushed out. Bali, I know as someone with a new 3DS, this probably sounds great to you, not having to unscrew a whole back panel.
I'm delighted to hear that there's no panels that you have to get a specific screwdriver for to unscrew, and then you literally make this horrible cracking sound as you pull this bit of plastic off.
I remember when you were trying to take it off, you were afraid you were just going to break the whole system.
Is that what you do with the new 3DS?
Yeah, there's two screws. I'm just looking at my new 3DS now. There's two screws that they half unscrew. They don't come all the way out, so make sure, I guess, you don't lose the screws. And you undo them halfway. It loosens the panel on the back. But it doesn't feel very loose when you do it, and you genuinely just have to stick your thumb round the side and just yank it off, and it's a really horrible sound. Like you think, and it is plastic, so like if you did it too hard or too fast, you could probably snap it quite easily. But it's just terrible design, to be frank, and especially compared to the earlier iteration of the 3DS where you just slide an SD card in the side. It was mental.
That's weird. I don't know why they do that.
Yeah, it's so impractical. It's also one of those weird things about the stylus. Like every new iteration of DS hardware, the stylus ends up somewhere else. And I think the perfect position for it is just where they put it in the DS Lite, like on the side. You can just slip it out.
Side.
But they insisted on changing it every time. It's like, why don't you just stick with what's good? Like, it doesn't make much sense to me. So moving on quickly, then we have basically no USB drive, apparently, no support for the dock itself to add extra memory, which I guess makes sense because you don't want to have a situation where someone has downloaded something to a hard drive and then realizes when they take it on the go they can't have access to that anymore. And it's unfortunate, but I think that, like, for some consumers who are just going to leave it in the dock, it's probably quite frustrating that they don't have that ability to kind of plug in and get the 500 gigs and just kind of not have to worry about storage anymore. But I don't know, with SD cards being so big now and probably getting cheaper and cheaper over time, do you think this matters anymore?
I don't really think it matters that much. I think it will matter, I think, to people who want to go all digital, but I think physical is still the leading way right now. It'll be a while before it really becomes an issue, I think, and people, start to prefer digital over physical. With cartridges, it will mean that most of the stuff will be stored on the cartridge itself, including perhaps save files. So I'm not too bothered about it myself because I buy physical copies most of the time. Yeah, I can see it being an issue later in the generation as people start to download more games and that kind of thing. But short term, it's not a problem for me. I'm not really that bothered.
I think it's weird also because you can definitely sort of see what look like USB slots in the dock, and I presume that would be for plugging in something else like chargeable controllers or something like,
or even the GameCube adapter, perhaps. Smash Brothers.
Yeah, so like there's
Nintendo's like
something.
leaving behind all this Wii stuff, but no, the GameCube controller probably going to come along for that Smash
making
community.
a strong return after no showing on Wii U.
Yeah, absolutely. But Bali, I mean, you were someone who was saying, I'm going to go all digital next generation with Nintendo. Do you think that's still going to be a thing you do? I guess, like, for us, it very much depends on the UK and how prices here are fucking awful digitally.
Yeah.
Like, the retailers undercut digital by so much that it makes zero sense for us to do it.
Exactly. It's that sort of handful of times where Nintendo do some quite good sales at times that I have gone digital a few times, and sometimes Amazon is just a bit slow, and there's often an extra expense with me living in Brussels and things. So I won't get into detail, but like it's sometimes is a lot cheaper to go digital even now.
Yeah, it has its benefits for sure. So then another little few things that have been brought up. There was some stuff coming out of the Q&A with Nintendo, and Kimishima's done some interviews and stuff, and a couple of things he said. They expect to ship 2 million Switches by the end of the fiscal year, which is end of March, I believe. And that kind of brings to mind, like, when is this system coming out? Do we think it's going to be kind of the middle of March? It would make sense from that perspective, because if it was the start of March and that whole month, 2 million maybe seems like they're kind of undershooting. So you guys have any predictions for when we can kind of predict the Switch's launch is going to be within March?
I'd probably say probably about March 20th or something like that, like mid to late. March seems sensible to me, but I don't know. I have no real insight into that. I do think I don't say that the start of March because they've been putting off a lot of Switch stuff. I think the main reason for holding it back past Christmas is to make sure they have a lot of the big games ready for launch in the launch window.
Right.
I think people will be surprised by how many things they have ready within the first 6 months. I think possibly that Mario game will be within the first 6 months. Definitely, probably speculatory territory here, but probably Mario Maker. It wouldn't surprise me if Smash Brothers came in around that time as well. I think I'm trying not to say things that I shouldn't say. But I think there are big games coming within the first 6 months. And they wanted to have those ready, so they've kind of put it off pretty far. So I think mid to late March sounds sensible to me.
Yeah. What about you, Bally?
I think MBZ, you sent me you tweeted something and I commented and you thought it was a specific date based on Monster Hunter, I believe it was.
Oh, right, yes. So a new Monster Hunter game just got announced, which is supposed to come out on the 18th of March.
And then I looked up that date and I realized it was a Saturday. And I was like, that'd be a weird day for it to come out. So we I thought that maybe it would be the Friday before that, so the 17th of March. And that's kind of exciting because it's kind of halfway through March and not the end, which is when you would have thought it would be. So,
and it also gives them like a good window in which to ship 2 million units, right? Because if it was the 29th, then like good luck like doing that overnight. But with a bit more of a wide window, they could probably do it, no problem. But I mean, talking about the launch, I've been thinking, is there a possibility that we get another pack in? Because it has been a thing for the last 2 generations. Wii came with Wii Sports, the Wii U came with Nintendo Land. And I'm thinking like there are definitely games within their lineup that they could use because they are essentially ports or enhanced versions of Wii U games. But then like things like Mario Kart, you step back and you're like, well, Mario Kart is in 60% of Wii U's. Like, it has the most insane install base. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, the attach rate of Mario Kart to the Wii U system. So, would they pack that in? It doesn't really make sense, does it, when they could sell so many more systems or copies on its own?
What if you had a group of perhaps 3 Wii U games? So the 3 could be Mario Kart, Splatoon, and I'll throw in Mario Maker just for the sake of argument. Sure. What if they were all on one compilation disc and ultimately...
Man, that feels like throwing away money, though.
Perhaps. But if you look at it in the sense that they're going to change those games very little. I mean, we don't know how much they're going to change, and the trailer you can argue either way. You can say they're changing all this, or you can argue, oh no, they're just adding someone like King Boo. So if they went for let's not change these games too much, but just improve them a little bit, and then put them on some sort of compilation, I don't know. Maybe that you're right. Yeah. Maybe that would be throwing money away. But I could definitely see them adding a Wii U remake pack in, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I don't know about like putting them all in one, but I could definitely see them packing it with like Splatoon for people who didn't play it on the Wii U. The Look Who's Come Crawling Back bundle.
Right, basically. Oh dear. Yeah, so the thing with that as well, which would be very smart, is then you guarantee this huge number of people who own the games, and therefore you have an online community that's guaranteed to be more vibrant and to stay around longer, right? Like, and then Splatoon has done very well on Wii U, and there's still people playing it to this day. But imagine like that at launch and guaranteeing that everyone has a copy, you know? Like, that seems a great way to keep that community going.
And presumably you would get your brand new Splatoon and brand new Mario Kart a little bit down the line. So like you're maximizing, money essentially.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think there's a couple more rumors we could maybe go to, and they have been kind of outed by Eurogamer, which are kind of the obvious ones that people expect, which is that obviously the screen is going to be 720p and capacitive touch and is 6.2 inches in size. I think, I pretty much believe that is the case. Like, that seems very obvious. I think so many people are going on about how they didn't touch it in the trailer, but I feel like it has to be touch at this point. It doesn't make sense without it.
I mean, it's just an expectation of modern screens on portables. Right. Of course it's going to be, and it is time for them to go for a multi-touch display and I think move on from styluses. I think a lot of people don't like those, and prefer multi-touch. That's the way Apple and, smartphone makers have conditioned us to feel.
Sure. If you do like styluses, you can, I believe, buy capacitive styluses as well.
Yeah, sure.
So
I would also hope that they get away from, if it is if you can touch it with your fingers, that they get away from this whole having a ridge around the touchscreen. So it'd be nice that if you are getting your fingerprints on it, that you can still get a cloth and wipe cleanly across the whole system without, having that ridge that you can never get anything into out, using like a needle or something.
Yeah, sure. That's the worst, that.
Absolutely.
Just a build-up of skin. It's horrible.
Yeah. So, Bali, we've got some questions that maybe focus on some particular aspects we can drill down into. So have you got an email you want to bring in?
Got an email from friend of the show, Toby. Check him out on YouTube, Director Toby. He says, finally, the NX has been revealed. It's a shame about the name, but it's accessible at least. The biggest question that no one is asking is, how is this tech possible? It's the size of an iPad. An iPad can't run home console quality games, and Apple must have larger engineering team than Nintendo. What is it then Nintendo isn't telling us about the Switch? What are its limitations? For example, can you only buffer or load limited portions of games? How hot is it going to get? And what's the battery life going to be? Love the podcast. I fell asleep listening to your review of Earthbound and awoke to the nightmarish ending of turning into a robot. Not only did you spoil the ending, but also gave me nightmares. Thanks, guys.
Yes, we've been known to give people nightmares on this podcast.
Every day.
So be careful. Be careful. It is fragile. So, the tech behind the Switch, how can it do what it does? I'm not very technically minded. I do computer stuff, but I'm not super in the weeds. But my guess would be, in terms of it being able to run things like Breath of the Wild, is this system is made to play video games. So you have, NVIDIA making this chip for it. It's custom made, that is deliberately created so that the games can run well and be optimized for on-the-go play and all that stuff. And when you look at an iPad or something to that effect, that is a device built with many functions in mind, right? So you have applications and streaming music and video and all these different things. So as a result, it's not fine-tuned directly for video game application, and therefore it does not do as well in certain circumstances. So that's my take. Do either of you have any other theories as to how it could run this stuff?
Yeah. If you want more information on how exactly it runs, go and read NVIDIA's press release from the day they announced the Switch. They have some insight into the type of development that went on behind the scenes on the Switch hardware, and they talk about how there's many thousands of man hours poured into making it run properly. It essentially, from what I understand, it uses similar technology to the Shield tablets.
Right? Yes.
Those are pretty much made specially for gamers.
Yeah, the Shield stuff is basically the Switch before the Switch existed.
Yeah.
But much higher price range, and obviously drawing on stuff from Steam and PC stuff. So.
Sure. So, I mean, I think there is a precedent for that technology existing. I don't think it's exclusive to Nintendo. I think if you look at what Nvidia's done before, they have a history of doing stuff like this, and yeah. Although it is impressive, I have to say, I hope it runs well, because I think it will.
Yeah. I mean, that's the danger, really, though, isn't it? Is the thing that I worry the most about is frame rate, because it's something that I feel very important, and Nintendo generally tend to focus on. They make sure that the frame rate in their games is solid and good and not a nightmare. And there's the potential that could be impacted when it comes to a handheld, although you have things like Smash Brothers on 3DS, which runs at a full 60 in 3D. So they're definitely capable of making stuff look nice.
When it comes to first party Nintendo stuff, I'm not concerned at all, because
totally,
they have a good standard of quality control, especially with the big titles like Zelda and Metroid.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't have said that. Metroid.
Mario, obviously. I don't know. People were saying in the trailer that when they looked at Breath of the Wild on the touchscreen or the tablet or whatever, it looked like it was dropping frames. I'm not sure that that's true, because it seemed like he was using kind of the slow down move there to do that stuff, which is a mechanic in Zelda. It's very hard to tell. You have such a brief look at it. So
yeah, especially since we're still so far away from the launch as well. It's not quite right to judge it upon that.
Sure, and obviously frame rate is something that gets optimized quite late in the process.
Yeah.
So.
And I'd be curious to know as well, because it was proven that the screens you see on the system during the trailer are sort of superimposed later. So like what was running those games that we could see? Was it coming straight from the system,
right,
or was it something else? So like I don't know. It's tricky to sort of talk about 60 frames per second and how good the game's looking.
Yeah,
when we don't know for a fact what they're running off in that trailer.
Right. Ultimately, it's a marketing video that's not going to be representative of like actual final product. So we, kind of take it with a grain of salt, I guess, and hopefully they'll get everything figured out by then. But in terms of like heating concerns and stuff, it does seem like there is a fan on the system or something that kind of cools it to some degree. Yeah, it looks like there is a vent on the top. Do you think that's a fan? I don't know, because I feel like as a portable system, you don't want it to be that loud as well. And I'm not sure if that would, moving parts is generally not the best idea. So I'm not sure how the fan would go. Do either of you think that there is one in there?
Well, on the prototypes, there was said to be a fan, but I think that is just temporary. It's just a prototype thing. I think there'll be some kind of vent somewhere, because obviously it's generating a lot. It'll probably generate quite a lot of heat if you don't vent that. I think there won't be a fan, because something like that could be damaged by just shaking the thing about.
Sure, yeah.
It would be very hard to create a fan, a moving part thing like that wouldn't be susceptible to damage just from regular lifestyle, having it in your bag and that kind of thing. So yeah, but I do think there will be some kind of vent. I don't know about fans though.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see like if just the vent is enough to keep it cool enough, and obviously that'll still let in a lot of dust and things, and will there be ways to get it cleaned and all this? I don't know, but I don't know. Certainly I know my laptop at the moment, I've not had it like cleaned for dust, and it gets really loud at times, and I'd be scared that if there was some sort of fan, that dust buildup could make that fan operate louder and become more of a nuisance.
Yeah, your Mac just fucking takes off like an airplane.
Just takes off.
It's just, oh my god, I don't know how you deal with it. But I think like core to all of this, of course, is battery concern, right? Like a lot of rumors going around about that. Apparently, it's supposed to be quite mediocre. We've heard from the Ubisoft source, which was saying about 3 hours maximum. Which when you take it like that sounds really bad, right? Like face value 3 hours seems awful. But I step back from it and I think, well, my 3DS battery, to be fair, is not that great. I play with 3D on, so I'm obviously kind of putting it to the max, like juice-wise, and I don't feel like it's that big of a deficiency. I don't know. I think that like, where are the situations where you're going to be needing it more than 3 hours? If you're sitting in an airport and then you have a very long flight, that's probably a bad thing. But then you also probably have access to some kind of power connection, right? Either at the airport or on the plane itself. And I mean, maybe in a car, but then you have the potential of using, in-car chargers as well. So I'm trying to think, like, is there a situation where having it alone by yourself for 3 full hours and you're constantly playing it is that big a deal right now? I don't know. For certain people it will be, but when I look at the way I use 3DS, and I guess even Wii U, although Wii U is tied to the system, so I have a charger on me at all times, I don't know that it's as catastrophic as people are making out to be.
Yeah, I mean, people said similar things when the 3DS, when we started to hear about its battery back in the day, in 2011, whenever that was, and it was all doom and gloom about that, and it turned out, in my opinion, it wasn't that bad. I can't really think of many times when I've fully drained my 3DS's battery, and I think now in 2017, by the time it comes out, most people have some kind of like portable charger. I know this is a stupid excuse, but most people have some kind of like portable charger for phones or whatever.
I don't think it's actually that stupid, like, especially considering Pokemon Go's recent success, right? Like, basically everyone was buying portable chargers just so that they could run around and not have their phones die. So
yeah, so in my opinion, if people want to use it more than 3 hours, they'll find ways to. It's not that big of a deal. But I think most people will probably just play it on the TV.
Yeah,
I'd expect. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
I think that the 3 hours is concerning to a degree. I'd be interested to know, because this is certainly the case with my 3DS, or maybe I should say new 3DS. I don't know if that's got any better battery, but when I'm playing a sort of retro game, so maybe a Game Boy Color game on my 3DS, and I've got the screen, I try to play with the screen on like a lowish brightness. It lasts an incredibly long time, and obviously virtual console games on the 3DS don't use the 3D. That helps massively as well, but it lasts a really long time. I would argue sort of 6, 7, 8 hours when I'm playing a game like Link's Awakening without any of the, the 3D, the brightness, etc. So I'd be interested to see. I would assume that the Switch will have a formal virtual console when you're playing those games that aren't, the big open world Zeldas. And you play with the brightness maybe down a little bit more. Can you
turn off the Wi-Fi as well?
Turn off the Wi-Fi.
3DS, you have the Switch that you can turn off.
Exactly.
So.
Like, will you be able to squeeze 5 hours out of a system that is supposedly a 3-hour battery?
Yeah, I imagine you could do, like, obviously stuff which is less intensive is going to be less taxing, and I don't know, I feel like there's going to be, hopefully, good virtual console support on Switch, because I think that's going to be a big appeal to a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, like, I think there was another rumor saying that the shoulder buttons were GameCube-style buttons, where they have the
analog
pressure and then analog.
God,
right?
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, that would open the door to the GameCube Virtual Console, so it would definitely solve that issue.
F-Zero GX on a handheld.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
That would be crazy. That would be, yeah, I mean...
That would be wonderful.
They're not going to release another F-Zero, so at least put the old one in there, right?
Don't say
dear. Gotta curse it. So yeah, I don't know. I think, like, it's definitely a kind of panic situation, right? When you hear 3 hours, it just sounds terrible. So I think it's probably a thing marketing wise they have to get over more than end user, like, actual it being an issue. So we'll see how they handle that, but they're going to have to talk about it at some point. So it will crop up. Bally, yeah, do we have another email to go to with some more stuff?
Sure. We got an email from Renee, who's from Germany. They've got a couple of points. First of all, what do you think they will charge for the Switch? Rumour suggests it being 400 or 300 euros/dollars, and I expect them to not include a Pro Controller then. I prefer playing with a Pro Controller, and I'm sick of always having to pay for another thing to play the thing I want on my Nintendo console. Secondly, you mentioned it in your Switch reveal special, but I'd like to pick it up again. Do you think we will be able to play 3DS games on the Switch at some point? There may be no physical compatibility between Switch and Wii U/3DS games, but it could be possible to use digital copies. Since the Switch is both handheld and home console, do you think Nintendo will make a new handheld after the 3DS? Of course, the DS and 3DS were a huge success, and they don't want to abandon the name, but it would be kind of redundant to have a pure handheld alongside the Switch.
So, a bunch of different things in there. Maybe let's go with the 3DS stuff first, because that was also something that came out, is that I think Nintendo confirmed there would not be any physical compatibility with Wii U or 3DS, right? I think they stressed to make sure they said physical, because there is a window of opportunity that they could potentially have a digital storefront where they have virtual console stuff from past systems like 3DS. The thing that he makes the point at the end about, like, them not wanting to abandon the name and not leave it is very much up to how the Switch does commercially and whether it is a success.
Definitely.
If it's a success, then, hey, it's like the DS and GBA, where Game Boy is an incredibly powerful name for them, but guess what? DS did extremely well, so that they could abandon it and they went on and carried the DS name. It's the same situation here. If Switch does incredibly well, then they shouldn't have any worries about dropping 3DS, and they should focus all their resources on continuing to do Switch stuff. I think when you're talking about portables, I think Nintendo also confirmed recently that the system itself is only going to be sold with the dock. They're not going to sell it standalone, so you can't just buy the tablet with the Joy-Cons without having it.
Because if you sell it standalone, you can't switch.
Right, exactly. It kind of confuses their marketing message. But like maybe 2 years in, that's the point in time where I imagine you could introduce a smaller model that's maybe more battery friendly, that is, able to kind of do stuff that the original is not as good at doing, and therefore like becomes cheaper as a smaller model as well. But it still remains within the Switch family. So you still play the exact same games, everything transfers across with a unified account system, and they can sell people another thing again. And, that's potentially much more appetizing to some people, because it means they don't have to rebuy a bunch of different stuff. They can keep everything they already own, but they can also have it as an option to maybe like give one of their kids one of these smaller ones, because they don't want to have their one, compromised. So... what do you guys think about that? Do you think that like that's a potential direction they can go in, as opposed to just having the 3DS line continue?
Well, I agree with what you're saying mostly. I think in terms of like backwards compatibility, digital or physical, I think you can wave bye-bye to that. I've said that from the beginning with both Wii U and 3DS. I don't think there's going to be any crossover. They'll keep the 3DS line going because it's been a success, as you say, and they'll just say, if you want 3DS, there it is, go for that. But
we have a system for you. It's called the
Yes.
Xbox 360.
yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. But I think with Switch, they're going to focus on Switch stuff. And there was a lot in that question. There was some. Did he ask about the price?
Yeah. So we can move to price then, because that's a big deal. I think it's something that they have to get right. It's very important. What do you think about like what do they have to come into the market with to be competitive and to do well?
Well, I think they have to undercut the PS4 at least, and I think they can't sell this for anything more than £250 in the UK.
Yes,
and $300 in the US probably. Because if you do that, then it's just not going to fly. Look at what happened with the Wii U, and yeah, people I think will be willing to buy a cheaper companion to the PS4 and Xbox One and their PCs or whatever. But if you start putting this in the same price range as a PS4, I don't think it's going to be able to compete. I think that won't work out for them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think in the UK, I'd even go between £250 and £300, but I would definitely agree that the second you're in that high end of the 200s and closer to 300, it just becomes considerably less appealing and marketable. And then back quickly on the Wii U 3DS backwards compatibility, I completely agree with you, Liam. I think it's going to be a clean break, and I think that's where the opportunity for these Wii U remakes is. And put simply, I think trying to emulate Wii U or 3DS games on this system is just going to be too much of a faff. It's going to be too difficult. I think you've obviously seen the DS Virtual Console on the Wii U, and it's a bit awkward, to be honest. It's a bit strange, and they'd have to do something like that if they're wanting to incorporate these games which are using the two screens, whether that's Wii U or 3DS. So I think it's probably going to be a clean break. Go for it.
Yeah, and also, I don't even know if it's technically possible to have both screens going at once, because...
Yeah, exactly.
I doubt it is, because, I mean, to have it on the TV, it has to sit in the dock, so...
Exactly, so...
And I mentioned this on our reaction to the Switch, and I should make a correction, because I said, you could just hold it in your hand and play on the screen at the same time. Obviously, that's not the case, so I will retract.
No, it's not a Wii U
comment
anymore, Bally.
It's not a Wii U. It's not a Wii U.
So
yeah,
like if you were to do 3DS stuff digitally, you'd have to flip the screen so that it's vertical, right? So that you can then like you don't have the controls, so what do? Did they release a Joy-Con edition that,
I mean, if you imagine
controllers on the side, like it just gets really messy.
If you imagine the Switch held lengthways, you've got your Joy-Con along the bottom that they are suggesting that you can detach and play on that angle anyway, if that makes sense. If you can visualize what I'm trying to explain here. So
I mean, like if you play them like Wii Remote and Nunchuck, potentially like putting on its side, having the controls as Wii Remote and Nunchuck, and kind of like playing it that way, like there are ways for them to do this, is what I'm saying. Like it's possible potentially. It just sounds really awkward and bad.
It's awkward as hell, but it's doable if they're desperate to do it. I can definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I think it comes back to a messaging thing that they want to move away from Wii and 3DS, Wii and DS. I mean,
exactly,
and do something, a new thing from a marketing perspective as well.
Yeah, I mean, like cutting ties with that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have any virtual console support, because I think like being a more traditional console, you can just easily take things from NES, Super Nintendo, like N64, GameCube. Like if you're focusing on those as like your more classic line, none of those have any like overt gimmicks that have trouble, emulation wise. So that's definitely something that they can really drill down on. But quickly going back to price, I think it has to be $250 in order to do very well. Basically, I think like it will sell fine at $300, but if you hit $250, people will be far more likely to impulse buy this thing and say, "Oh man, that looks really good." Like this is the only place, well, not the only place you can play the new Zelda, but it's the best place to play the new Zelda. They have the promise of all these other games. There are these, Wii U games that probably the person who's buying this impulse wise didn't play. It's a very competitive price, $250. And I think that's what the Wii came in at in the US as well, and that's why it did so successfully. So
yeah, I think if you look back all the way to Iwata's comments, he talked about how the next Nintendo platform should be much more competitively priced. When he was talking about, when he was addressing the investors back in the day with the Wii U, I think they kind of learned their lesson there, that it was too much and people weren't willing to pay that much for a Nintendo platform, that it should be cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, like it was the same thing with the 3DS as well. Like they had to cut that price real steeply. So, yeah, I mean, it definitely makes sense that they would do that. And man, I do hope that it is a price that doesn't kind of gouge us, because it would be such a shame for all this excitement and everything, and then all these bad things kind of plague it, but at the end, oh god, no, please, it just, could be a bad thing. I think I'm just trying to think if there's anything else from that email that we can pick out, but otherwise we can move on to another one, Bally.
Sure. How about our final email, which is from Terence, who's from the internet. Terence again, and after all the stuff we saw from the Switch, I'm pretty impressed, but I do have some concerns and I'd like to hear your opinion on them. What do you think the durability of this console will be like? With these pieces that switch in and out and an open-face tablet, how sturdy will this be, and will that impact the upfront cost for consumers?
Okay, so the thing that I maybe have the concern over is constantly switching these controllers in and out of the console. And how much that's going to wear on it, and how well built the Joy-Cons are.
It has to make that sound every time as well.
Yeah, obviously, it has to. So that's part of the marketing. Like, people are going to sue them if they don't, clearly. I think that's probably my big issue, is like, is this going to wear over time? Like, how well built is it? But generally, I feel like Nintendo consoles out the gate are pretty much solid. Like, the couple issues I've had are the DS line, where my DS Lite, the hinge snapped and it became this floppy open thing that I couldn't keep solid anymore. That was definitely a design flaw in that system. There was also something to do with the original 3DS where it kind of scratched the top screen with the bottom screen thing, which happened to me as well. So like there are some oversights that happen, but I think generally speaking, Nintendo hardware is solid out the gate. I don't know how you guys feel about like the small controllers and whether they'll be any good.
I agree. I trust them on durability. I think they're up there with like Nokia in terms of indestructible hardware. So
yeah,
but I am concerned slightly with how thin the screen looks, and will the Joy-Cons wear over time? I think that remains to be seen, but I'm not too concerned myself.
Okay.
I think I would personally be concerned about that kickstand. It looks so skinny.
It does look quite fragile, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see if that's gonna stay solid. But with the Joy-Cons, and I mentioned this last time with the reveal about sort of analog sticks wearing out and this sort of thing, I think they're great because you can just switch them and get a new Joy-Con and just slide it in, and it should all work seamlessly. So I think that's a positive idea. But back to what you were saying, MBZ, that the crucial part for me is that the clicking of the Joy-Cons. Like, is that going to be something that does wear after time, the clicking constantly of Joy-Cons? And ultimately, like, when I imagine myself playing this, I can't see myself detaching the Joy-Cons very often, for the simple reason that when I'm on the go, I'm going to be playing it like a Wii U gamepad, and they're going to be attached. And when I'm at home, the whole thing is going to be in the dock, and I'm going to use the Pro Controller. And hopefully I won't have to detach them too often. Maybe there'll be some sort of carrying case where you can detach them and put them in, and I'd be interested in getting a carrying case, certainly, because this is a tablet in the sense where it's open. There's no hinge like a DS, obviously, to protect.
Yeah, no more clamshell,
which is concerning in some aspects, but I mean,
it just makes it less convenient, basically, right? Because over the years, like having the DS line of products, I never worry about screens getting scratched. I just throw it in my bag because it protects itself. Whereas my Vita, like, I did that with my Vita, and guess what? I got a couple scratches on it. So now I never leave it on its own. Like, I put it in a case every time. Like, I make sure it's in a sleeve. Yeah, the Vita can never be left alone. It's dangerous. So I definitely think that I'm going to want to take care of this thing and have some kind of sleeve or some kind of carrying case for it, because it becomes susceptible, and you know, I want it to stay nice and look good. But the Joy-Con situation makes sense, Bally, where you would just leave it in the dock, because there's no reason for you to remove them. Like, it may look a bit awkward just sitting there, but it doesn't seem like there's any negative to taking them out. The one thing I would say is, if the Joy-Cons are required to be charged with that grip, because it does look like in the center of that thing, like they're the light shining, it seems like the Joy-Con grip has some kind of charging functionality.
That'd be disappointing if they can't charge attached to the Switch in the dock, if you see what I'm saying.
Totally.
Like, I'd be surprised, but I can see that concern.
Yeah, I imagine, like, when you're playing with it attached to the Switch itself, that the Switch acts as a sort of charging thing, like, capable of making them keep going. So yeah, that probably is it. But I don't know. As far as, like, flimsiness or breakability, like, the only way things are going to break is if you do what Bally did, which was throw the Wiimote into my window and basically screw it up for the rest of its life.
Damn.
So that's Super Monkey Ball on Wii for you. It does it, you know? Baseball and Super Monkey Ball.
I got the world record.
You did. It was hilarious. He threw the Wii remote at my window, but he did get the top record. So.
Oh well, that's something.
Exactly. It's a silver lining.
It didn't break. It didn't break the window.
No, you didn't. Thank God you didn't, because that would have been a thing. Oh dear. Well, yeah, I think that might be it, Bally. Is there any other things we want to cover? Is there anything you guys still want to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I wanted to just bring up what we think this event is going to be on.
Right,
January
yeah, we should talk about
13th if you're in Europe, I believe it is, and 12th if you're in North America.
Yep. I have no idea if we're going to get screwed out in the time zone there. Because when NOA...
Yeah, it's going to be 3 a.m. I know it. I just know it.
When NOA say it's on the 12th and Nintendo of Europe are like it's the 13th...
It's not looking good.
There's a 5-hour window between, like, midnight of East Coast and our time, right? So, when's that going to happen? Like, I hope that we actually have a decent time. Because,
you either screw up the West Coast of the United States or you screw up Europe, and they've
I mean, Japan's fine because it's happening in Japan. So,
and I think they've chosen to screw up Europe, but that's life.
I mean, that's the smart decision from a market perspective, because the US is more important. They care more about Nintendo, and they're probably going to sell much more over there.
So what do you think they're going to show on the this event thing? So
they've confirmed they're going to say price and date. Yes, specific date. And they also said they're going to be unveiling their games lineup. So I imagine that we will know all the Wii U ports. I think that's 100% guaranteed. Like, if there's a Smash Brothers thing happening, we're going to get that. And I think if they are doing that, there's going to be surprises to come along with it. So, say a Smash Brothers version is being made, new characters make sense, that would be a great opportunity for them to say, hey, here's a new character that is going to be in this version. This is why you need to have this version of it. Same with Mario Kart. Like, here are some new tracks or some more retroized tracks that we've brought back. I think we're guaranteed to get all the Wii U ports there.
I think you'll get a bit more of that Mario game, and then hopefully one big extra kicker like an F-Zero or a Metroid, or just something that will maybe get a tiny trailer or a tiny few seconds of, just to get the hype train going. And it probably won't come out until 2018, who knows, but something like that. And I think depending on how good or bad the battery life thing is, they might just sneak out the battery life in like a separate press release and be really awkward about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking forward to that press release that comes out at the side. It might include something else about something else negative, but we'll see.
Do you think the Mario game is going to be named?
Probably, yes. I think the Mario game's pretty far along, so yeah,
Okay.
I think it will.
Okay.
Holiday
anything
2017, the Mario game, right?
Do you think it's going to be Holiday?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would work. Like, if you want a big game for the holiday season, Mario's a good bet. Trying to think what else they could potentially do. Like, Animal Crossing maybe seems like there's something going on there. Like, the mobile game obviously is coming before the end of the fiscal year. And if it is going to have compatibility with a new title, then they would probably be best off showing that sooner rather than later, right? So, my question really, though, is like, how much are they going to blow their load on this single event? Because
I think it's going to be big. I think it's going to be bigger than a lot of people are expecting it to be.
Oh, really?
Myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is their opportunity to say, okay, this is the next 2 years of most of the stuff, most of what they have planned. I think we're going to see Monolith's new game, Retro's new game.
Man.
I think there are going to be some things that people aren't expecting that they've been wanting for a long time, and some things that...
Do you think we'll get confirmation finally of this Beyond Good and Evil situation? Because that seems like an inevitability at this point.
Well, I think it does sound like that's happening. I did hear some like secondhand rumors about that going back several months, but I didn't take any of that seriously at all.
Okay.
But now, what's her name, Laura Kay?
Yes.
She's come out and she says it's legit, so I'm inclined to believe her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are going to be some big surprises. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of like teaser for a Platinum project, because we know Platinum is one of their partners.
Absolutely, yeah. That would be very exciting.
And yeah, this is before we really go into third-party surprises, what's there. But yeah, I think there are going to be some big first-party things that we haven't seen yet. We've only seen a tiny sliver of what that lineup is going to look like.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Monolith, and like, it seems like very recently that Xenoblade X came out, but that team seems to be pretty good at like cranking stuff, and they seem very capable. And I would imagine like if they were to put a new game out, it would probably still be another Xenoblade. Like, I think the director, I can't remember his name, but he has mentioned that in the next game he would want to be doing a more story focused thing that kind of kept the scope of Xenoblade X, which would be incredibly exciting for me, because I think the one weakness of X was it was kind of weak in the story department. It didn't really get me as interested as the original did. But like in terms of world exploration, that thing is above most other video games that exist. So I would be very excited to see more stuff from Monolith. Retro is the obvious one, right? Though, because like they've been silent for a very long time. Tropical Freeze came out in 2014, so time has happened. Things have gone on. Is it Metroid? Is it a new IP? I feel like it's new IP, personally.
Yeah, I know for a fact it's not Metroid, so we can say that right now. It's not Metroid. But I think it's either going to be a big returning franchise or it's going to be a new IP. I'm more inclined to believe new IP based upon who is rumoured to be working with them on it.
Okay.
But yeah, those are my thoughts.
When you look at the success of Splatoon, I think Nintendo are much less scared about jumping into new IP at this point. They're like, okay, man, that did well. Let's try more of that, maybe. And Retro, incredibly talented studio. I'm very interested to see what they would make, because, like, when you think about it, there are not many Western studios making exclusive games for Nintendo. Like, we have Next Level, who aren't actually owned by them, but basically do a lot of stuff for them, and we have Retro. And aside from that, like, it's kind of slim pickings. So, very curious about that. I mean, I don't know if Next Level are working on something else as well, because they seem to be a relatively large team. They could take on something new, so that's potential. Bally, is there any kind of developers, any studios you think are working on anything?
I mean, I obviously don't know as much as Liam over here, but I would just hope that I would be excited about new Retro IP. I think I obviously love their games, and I think anything that they bring out on the Switch is going to have a huge amount of respect and excitement behind it.
Yeah, totally. The one thing I would mention is Japanese third parties, in the sense that if they're going to talk about supporting or being supported by Square Enix and Atlus, and the potential of a Persona 5 version for Switch or a Final Fantasy 7 remake version for Switch, like these kind of things, which will do much better, I think, on a portable focused device than on a PS4 in the Japanese market. This event's happening in Japan. You have people there who could come on stage from Japanese third parties and say stuff and mention stuff. So I think that's probably something that could happen. So yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. The one thing I will say is that I'm glad we just have a date, right? Like, very glad. The whole situation before, like, the NX speculation train, what are they gonna do? Like, it was driving people to the edge of insanity. So I think that now that we actually know what's happening, we can, like, not go crazy every day. There were days when I was just sitting there refreshing GAF threads, like, non-stop, being like, is it happening? It's like, okay, we have this 3-hour window. This is gonna. We're all insane. We're all crazy people, but, like, it's gonna happen.
It's got to be today. It's got to be. It's got to be.
I mean, it was that day, and it happened. So. Yeah, well, I think we've pretty much covered a lot of stuff, and yeah, I think that's going to close things out. So, cool. Thanks, Liam, for joining us once again on the show. It's always great to get your insight. Always fun to have you on.
Yeah, I like being on. I always listen, and I love the show. And I'll share this about on my Twitter and try and get some more people to listen, because
excellent. Thank you very much.
I think this is one of the best Nintendo podcasts, up there with NVC.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate it.
I'll give you your money at the end.
Yeah. Yes. Check is in the mail. All right. Well, let's plug ourselves and get out of here then. Liam, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm at Dr_Cupcakes. That's Doctor, the full word, not DR. And I'm also on YouTube at youtube.com/Liam R Productions. Or if you just Google around Unseen64 to find the YouTube stuff, and that's me.
I believe that's your other name, isn't it? Unseen64.
That never gets old.
No, never. Bally, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. That is also my name on the Miiverse. So check me out there. And obviously the podcast Twitter account. It's at TNL Podcast. All the links to everything we're doing on the new YouTube channel there. So make sure you check out both the Twitter account and our new YouTube channel. Go find that stuff.
Great. You can find me at Lordnbz on the Twitter. I'm on the Miiverse as well. Haven't really been posting much on Miiverse lately. I just finished up Phoenix Wright, so that was some stuff. But yeah, I'll get back to that. I'm interested to see how Miiverse gets dealt with in the Switch landscape. But we'll have to wait and see. Of course, you can find the show in many places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we are on YouTube, and you can just go there. You can review us, you can rate us, download us. I think we got a recent rating. I'm not sure if it was a review yet, Bally. We're waiting for that to come through. But even if you just want to rate us, it's very easy. It's one click. Go on iTunes and just do it, because it helps the show, helps it get out to more people, all that good stuff. And I think that's pretty much it, Bally. Anything before we close things out?
It's the Switch and conference. It's close. It's close. It's an exciting few weeks coming.
We have to set our timer, ticking down. So again, thanks Liam for joining us, and
Thank you.
we will see you back in a couple of weeks' time with some more chat about Nintendo. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interlude used on today's show was a remix of Vampire Killer from Castlevania. But it was definitely an individual product of its own accord.
Yeah. Oh, would you look at that? My alarm has gone off in my flat. Wow. Right. I might have to go and fix that unless someone else does, which they hopefully will soon. Come on, you can do it. There we go.